Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the final meditation and Dhamma talk in this series. So we'll start with a period of meditation. So I'll be giving detailed guided meditation this evening. So please go ahead and get in a comfortable meditation posture. So taking a few moments to really carefully establish the position of your legs, making sure that you're sitting properly on your cushion so that you're not cutting off the circulation to anything. The weight is distributed evenly on your sitting bones. Pelvis tilted slightly forward so that the spine easily rests in an upright position. Take a few long, slow, deep breaths, letting the body and mind relax with each breath. And once you're settled into position, make a determination to let the body be still. Someone once asked a monk, "What's the secret to strong samadhi?" And the monk answered, "Don't move." It's a very simple instruction, but it makes a huge difference. So let the body be still as possible. Bring attention to your body, feeling the heaviness of the body, its solidity, its density. So feeling the body as a heavy, hard, solid object. Like a large stone, a pile of gravel or dirt. Or a tree. So feeling the body as heavy, solid, firm, dense, like the earth. So feeling the earth-like aspect of the bodily experience. And as you feel the earth aspect of the body, the solid, heavy, hard component of the body, you can recognize that the body is made up of exactly the same solid matter as the cushion it's sitting on, as the floor beneath the body, the walls and ceiling around it, the buildings and trees and stones and dirt outside, the whole earth, and in fact, all the solid matter in the universe. This body is made up of exactly the same solid matter as everything else in the whole universe. And in fact, the body is constantly exchanging solid matter with the outside world. So even just as we're sitting here, the body is shedding skin cells, dropping off bits of skin everywhere. We're constantly leaving a trail of dust everywhere we go. And that dust is the body's own earth element flaking off. Bits of hair falling off. And from time to time, we use the toilet and let go of substantial amounts of solid matter from the body. And from time to time, we eat food and put substantial amounts of solid matter into the body. But it's all just the same solid matter. So outside, the dirt grows plants. We eat the plants. The plants become the body. And the body sheds that matter. And it returns to the earth, becomes dirt again, which grows into plants, and so on. But it's all just the same solid matter. So is the dust in your house, is that dust you? No, it's just the earth element. Is the feces in the toilet, is that you? No, it's just earth element. The dirt and the soil outside, is that you? It's just earth element. The plants, is that you? No, it's just earth element. When you eat the plants, is that you? Still just earth element, still not you. As the body processes the plants and turns it into muscles and bones, is that you? It's still just earth element, still not you. So every step in the cycle, it's just earth element. It's just the solid matter of the natural world, changing position, changing shape, but always not me, not mine, just a function of the natural world. So feel the earth element of the body in this way. Not me, not mine, just an aspect of the natural world. No different from the soil, the trees, the stones, the buildings. Just solid matter. Just the natural world. That's all. Not me, not mine. Just nature. Then bringing attention to the water aspect of the body, the feeling of wetness, fluidity, liquid. So you can feel it, the saliva in your mouth, tears in your eyes, the fluid in your stomach, the blood rushing through the veins, the moisture saturating all the flesh. The whole body is wet. Water circulates through the whole body. So focusing on the liquid, wet, watery aspect of the body. As if the body was a container of water swirling and circulating, or a dense cloud of fog, feeling its wetness. You can even feel the subtle film of moisture on your skin, feeling the water element of the body inside and out. And recognizing that the water element in the body is the same as the water element in the rest of the world. It's the same as the water in the clouds, it falls in rain and snow, the dampness in the soil, the rivers and lakes and oceans. It's all just the same water element, same aspect of liquidity, the same experience of wetness. And the body is constantly taking in moisture, so absorbing moisture from the air, taking in moisture through the mouth when we drink. And the body is giving off moisture when we sweat, when we cry, when we blow our nose, when we urinate. So water flows out of the body, and then we see it is not me, it is not mine. It's just the liquid aspect of the natural world. And that water soaks back into the earth or the soil or evaporates into the air. And eventually it turns up in our drinking water and it goes back into the body. And there's this cycle of water flowing in and out of the body. And at no point is it me or mine. At every point in the cycle, it's just water element. It's just the liquid aspect of the natural world. Not me, not mine, just nature. Just nature doing what nature does. So feeling the water aspect of your experience and knowing it in this way. Not me, not mine, just nature. Inseparable from the outside world. No inside, no outside, just water element. And feeling the heat of the body, radiant warmth permeating the whole body. Just the same as the radiant heat of a bonfire or of a blazing star. Feel the heat of the body, the fire element. And of course, the heat element in the body is the same as the heat in the rest of the world. So the body gives off heat, constantly producing heat and radiating it into the world around it. And the body also absorbs heat from whatever radiant objects are around it, whatever sources of warmth it comes in contact with. So heat energy is constantly flowing in and out of the body. It knows no boundaries, and it knows no identity. It's just the heat element, just a function of the natural world. Not me, not mine, just nature, just heat. So feel the heat element of the body in this way, knowing that Heat is not limited to our concept of body, not limited to our concept of self. Heat is just heat, just a function of the natural world. That's all. So you can begin to let go of the idea that the body has edges and boundaries, letting go of the concept of a separate body altogether. Just feeling the heat element with no concept of inside or outside. And coming to the wind element, the air element. So feeling the air flowing through the body, feeling the body inflate with every breath, like a balloon, expanding and contracting moment by moment. So the air flows in, filling the lungs, from the lungs, filling the blood vessels, filling the whole body. So no part of the body is untouched by the air element. And with every breath, expelling the air element from the body. So it's just this cycle. The air around the body is not me, not mine. The air around the body is just part of the natural environment. And the air inside the body is inseparable from the air outside the body. There is no inside or outside, there's just air. Just as the wind blows, distributing air throughout the atmosphere, in the same way, air blows in and out of the body. But it's all just part of the natural world. Not me, not mine, just nature. Bringing attention to the space occupied by the body. So, not the body itself, but the body shaped region of space that the body occupies. So, space has no substance, it just holds whatever is present. It allows things to come and go within it without obstruction, without resistance. So bring attention to the space occupied by the body. Noticing that we think of the space occupied by the body as my space, my personal space. And we even extend that a short distance around the body, my personal space. But actually, it's just space. It's just the same space element that pervades the entire universe. And there are no lines or boundaries or edges in space. It's just one vast, indivisible field of space. There are no bodies. There is no inside or outside. It's just space. So we can let the concept of personal space melt away. We can let the concept of the body's space melt away. And just feel the vast extent of space. Unclaimed, unowned, unobstructing. The space element, just a natural part of the universe. Not me, not mine, just nature. And all five of these elements are taking place within the vast field of consciousness. So, just as space is a vast open field which physical objects move through, consciousness is a vast open field which all things move through. And just as space is simply a natural part of the world, just a function of nature, in the same way, consciousness is just a function of nature. not me, not mine, just an aspect of the natural world. And at this point, one can recognize there's nothing left, there's nothing else. Every single part of our experience fits within these 6 elements. And every part of our experience is seen to be not me, not mine, just an aspect of the natural world. Just rest in that awareness for a few moments. So you can adjust your posture. And I'll give homage to the Buddha and then share some words of Dhamma. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namassami. So, tonight, or this morning for Aya Vimlanyani, but tonight will be the last talk in this Introduction to Meditation series. So hello to the people joining in so far: Elaine, Jonathan, Mike, Jens, Denise, Melinda, Kumu, Aya Vimlanyani, Kauser Friend, Mary, Adine, Stacy, and Amaranta. Welcome, everyone. So this morning I started speaking a bit about Vipassana, insight practices which lead to the experience of liberating wisdom, the development of liberating insight and wisdom. And just now we did the meditation on the 6 elements. So contemplation of the 6 elements as a way of developing the perception of not self, which I had mentioned briefly this morning. So while most of the meditation practices that I do are quite uncomplicated and straightforward, the contemplation of the 6 elements is one of the more elaborate ones that I like to use from time to time. But it still relies strongly upon the prior development of samadhi. If your samadhi is not particularly strong, if your samadhi is weak, then it will be difficult for you to stay with the experience of any particular element. If your mindfulness is vague and unclear, then you won't have a clear experience of any particular element. And if you lack a strong, clear, stable awareness of an element, then you will not be able to recognize its aspect of not self. You will not be able to see its impersonal nature. In that case, it will simply be a thought exercise, which is actually okay because that helps to build the foundation for the direct experience. Or it might be an imagination practice, which again is okay because it helps to, again, build up that foundation for direct experience. But it's only once one has a strong foundation of mindfulness and samadhi that this practice becomes a really powerful insight practice. So here at the monastery, we've been in a period of intensive meditation retreat for a few days. So my samadhi is a bit stronger than it is on an ordinary day-to-day basis. And as a result, this period of meditation was actually really lovely. It's really lovely to point the mind in that direction of parceling out experience into these 6 categories and recognizing the impersonal characteristic of each one of the 6 categories. But the other thing which is really clear also is that 30 minutes is not nearly enough time. That's only 5 minutes per element. That's really nowhere near enough time. So I recommend when using this practice to really take the time to dig deeply into each element. So actually maybe spending half an hour or an hour on one element. Do some walking meditation and then go and sit down again and pick up the next element. And spend a good 30, 45, 60 minutes on the next element, and so on. And to some degree, you can also keep your practice of the element going during walking meditation. It's a bit more challenging, but still quite doable. The earth element is in the heaviness of your footfalls, the heaviness of the body as it moves. The water element is in the wetness of the body. You can't miss it if the body's always wet. Fire element, again, you can't miss it. The body's always warm, and so on. So you can keep up with the contemplation of the elements even during walking meditation. For some reason, though, this is not a commonly taught meditation practice. The only contemporary teacher I know of who's placed much importance on it is Pa-Auk Sayadaw. I'm not actually aware of any other contemporary teacher who places much emphasis on the 6 elements meditation. Does anybody know of one other than Pa-Auk? No? I'm getting shaking heads in the audience.
You.
What?
You.
Oh. Yeah, me, I guess. Yeah, so this is a meditation practice it's really worth playing with. I found that certain kinds of people find it to be particularly well suited to their temperament, to their personality. Perhaps if you're more of an imaginative or creative type, perhaps that might make it more interesting to you. Or perhaps if you're more of a restless, agitated type and you like to be doing something during meditation, well, the contemplation of the 6 elements gives you something to do, something to play with and dig around in, something that you can roll around and experiment with. So I really encourage having a investigative, experimental attitude when using the 6 elements meditation. And actually, when using any meditation practice, it's important to have a mind which is investigative, experimental, and playful to a certain degree. So investigating what we're doing and the effects of what we're doing is one way of helping us to sharpen our skills with any particular meditation method. And it actually blows my mind, and I find it slightly depressing, how often people say things like, oh, I've been using such and such a method for the past 5 years and it's not going well. And I'm like, then why didn't you start doing something different like 4.5 years ago? Why have you been doing the same thing that's not working for 5 years straight? That's kind of dumb, actually, and kind of depressing. I mean, haven't you noticed that it's not working? Haven't you noticed that whatever you're doing is not getting good results? Isn't it time to try something different? Isn't it time to experiment with something different? And the truth is, once again, if what we're doing is not getting good results, then clearly it's time to do something different. So paying attention, what am I doing and what effect is it having? Is that effect leading towards stronger mindfulness and concentration? Is it leading towards a more gentle, compassionate mind? Is it leading towards a more resilient equanimity? Is it leading to a deeper understanding of impermanence and not self? And if the answer is no, then it's time to try something else. It's time to look closely at what we've been doing and ask ourselves, what else can I do which might get better results? How can I experiment with other ways, either other ways of using that particular meditation method or other meditation methods entirely? So then performing some more experiments, experimenting with other ways of meditating, and once again, observing what happens. How does it go? Is it getting good results or bad results or no results? What's happening? And of course, that's all supported by conversations with teachers. So talking to teachers and saying, well, this is what I've been doing and this is what's been happening. And this is what I'm experimenting with nowadays, and this is how it's going. And do you have any advice or any recommendations or any thoughts you'd like to share? So asking teachers about your experiences, sharing what's been going on, and getting their feedback. Again, you don't necessarily need to believe everything they say. You don't necessarily need to believe to follow every instruction they give. But having that outside perspective can be incredibly helpful. So one of the really transformative experiences in my monastic life was when I was, I think I was an anagarika at the time. So I'd just recently gone to stay at a Bayagiri monastery, and I'd been there for a few months. And prior to that, I'd been practicing Zen meditation for years. And I was like, well, now that I'm getting into Theravada, it's time for me to start using Theravada methods. So, and everyone in Theravada seems to be doing mindfulness of breathing. So I guess I'd better do mindfulness of breathing too. And it was just an utter, terrible, flaming disaster from day one. I've never been good with mindfulness of breathing. And I remember at one point, after I'd been at the monastery for several months, I went to one of the senior monks and I said, so I've been doing mindfulness of breathing and it's not going very well. And he just immediately says, well, why don't you do something different? And I was like, oh, we can do that? Oh, how about that? Oh, any recommendations? Yeah, and he recommended that I do mindfulness of the body instead. And I was like, oh, okay, I can give that a try. And it was great. It was great. That was much easier for me. And it continues to be the backbone of my meditation practice to this day, which is 12 years later now, I guess. Yeah, 12 years later. Math is hard. 13 years later? Anyway, a while. It's been really, really helpful. But part of what that really struck me about that was the realization that for all those months I had been doing something that wasn't working, but I hadn't been investigating what I was doing. I hadn't been considering what was going on. I hadn't been experimenting with other approaches. I just kept continually plugging away at the same thing that wasn't working over and over again, as if hoping that one day it would just magically start working. And this monk was like, well, why don't you just do something different? And what that really nailed home for me was the importance of being willing to, first off, pay attention to what we're doing and what effect it's having, and second, to experiment with different approaches and different methods. So not to get narrow in our approach to meditation practice, not to think that we have to do things in one particular way, but rather to have a free-flowing, creative mind, which is willing to explore and experiment and investigate, and to constantly see what we can do to move towards awakening. And of course, for that to be possible, it's necessary to have some concept of what awakening is. As I mentioned this morning, if we don't have some intellectual idea of what the goal of Buddhist practice is, of what it means to attain awakening, what it means to attain enlightenment, if we don't have at least a vague idea of what that means, then it's impossible to know the right direction to move in. And it's impossible to know who's guiding us correctly and who isn't. There's no way to know these things. If you don't know where you're going, you won't know how to get there. It's really as simple as that. So once you do have some idea of where we're trying to go, then you can try out different things and see, is this leading me in the right direction or not? And if the answer is no, then it's time to experiment with other ways. If the answer is yes, it might still be worth experimenting with other ways and see if you can find something that's more effective, something that maybe produces quicker results or more powerful results. And always to pay attention to what's happening, always to pay attention to what effect whatever you're doing is having. So I don't really have a lot to say this evening. So this is my 5th talk in 3 days. So I think I've actually said just about everything I could possibly want to say on the subject. I will say this though, it's really easy to overcomplicate our practice. It's really easy to make it seem more complicated than it actually is. In actuality, we're really not doing anything particularly complex. You want to practice samadhi? Easy. Don't move. Don't move your body. Don't move your mind. Don't move. That's it. Bam, jhana. Well, some waiting period to be expected. But actually, it's really not that complicated. The problem is that we keep moving our body and moving our mind. That's why we're not getting jhana. We tell ourselves we're meditating, but actually we're thinking about all kinds of random stuff. We're moving our mind all over the place. So a couple years ago, I spent some time in a Thich Nhat Hanh monastery. And they have all these cheerful little songs that they like to sing, and I hated most of them. But there was one line in particular that I actually quite enjoyed. And I'm not going to sing it because we don't do that here. But the line goes, the mind can go in 1,000 directions, but on this path it walks in peace. I've never forgotten that one. I've forgotten whether unintentionally or intentionally. I've forgotten everything else they made us sing. But this line I've never forgotten because it's actually really potent. Yeah, the mind can go in 1,000 directions. In fact, it's doing it all the time. And this is really clear when we're meditating. The mind keeps trying to go in 1,000 directions. But then the next line, on this path it walks in peace. So of course, this is meant to be an instruction for walking meditation. But it also applies more metaphorically. So on this path of Buddhist practice, we walk in peace. So yeah, the mind can go in 1,000 directions, but we're not bothered by that because we're walking the path of peace. We're doing the practices of peacefulness, of serenity. It's not complicated. Just don't follow along when the mind runs off in one direction or another. Just let it run off and keep walking the path of peace. And you'll realize that it was not you that ran away. It was just some noise floating through the mind, that's all. You didn't go anywhere. You were always just right here on this path of peace, that's all. Yeah, so samadhi's not complicated. Just don't move. That's it. And insight is also, well, slightly more complicated, but still not particularly complicated. Directly perceive the unsatisfying, insubstantial, and impersonal nature of all things. That's all. Whatever appears, recognize that it's unsatisfying, insubstantial, and impersonal. That's it. Not so complicated. And actually, you can do these practices together, as I spoke about this morning, I think. So with the practice of silent illumination, you can do both at the same time. So not moving while recognizing the insubstantial and impersonal nature of all phenomena. You can do it at the same time even. Again, not complicated, quite simple. We are the ones who complicate things. And part of that's because fundamentally, on a deep level, we're actually incredibly resistant to Buddhist meditation. So we are quite literally of two minds. And this becomes really clear every time you sit down to meditate. or start walking meditation. There's one part of our mind which is like, yes, I am the Buddhist meditator and I'm going to meditate my way to enlightenment. I am so great. Here we go, meditation. And the other part of our mind is like, I hate this. I'm not going to do this. This sucks so much. No, I'm just going to sit here and think about movies and cheese and what I'm going to bake tomorrow. If they'll let me bake, they probably won't even let me bake. Those bastards. What are they doing? And so there's these two minds. The mind is like, I'm going to meditate. Yes. And the mind which is like, hell no, you can't make me. And it's this constant little war inside our mind between the meditator and the non-meditator. And the tragic part is how often the non-meditator wins. But we keep at it. We keep at it. We keep at it. We keep at it. And slowly, over time, the habits of the mind start to change. But it takes patience. So much patience. I mean, seriously, without patience, you can't hope to walk this path. A sense of humor helps too, because you have to laugh at yourself. And you have to be willing to not take yourself too seriously, because seriously, this thing is a total joker. It's a clown. It's the most ridiculous clown. And if you take it seriously, then you're just going to hate yourself. But if you don't take it seriously, then you can just laugh at yourself whenever you do stupid things again. You just laugh at yourself and let it go and come back to the path and realize that you've never left the path. You've been on the path all along. And you just keep putting one step after another, one step in front of another, step after step after step after step after step. And don't worry about how long it's taking. It will take exactly how long it needs to take. And don't worry about where you are on the path, because you're exactly where you need to be. Just keep putting one foot in front of the other. Walk this path with peace. So I think I'll leave it there for the evening. So if you have any questions or comments, whoa, there's a few questions and comments. If you have any questions or comments, please go ahead and type them in and I'll answer them as best I can. Thank you. So we have so Amaranta has a question. Actually, it's a comment. But it looks like the first part of the comment got cut off, so I'm hopefully I'm not missing something here. If I am, please go ahead and type it in. So Amaranta says, I didn't go deeper because of sense desire until I decided to go deeper. I was comfortable with mindfulness and that's all. That was many years ago. Yeah. Sense desire is one of the basic obstacles to Buddhist practice because it's arising from the fundamental delusion, the delusion that happiness is found through getting things or getting experiences. And sense desire also arises from the failure to recognize that all things are fundamentally unsatisfying. Sense desire also is ultimately based upon a sense of self. I want that. There has to be a sense of self in order for there to be I want that. Me wanting those things. There has to be me. If there's no me, then there's no wanting. So yeah, sense desire is a direct manifestation of delusion. And the more we participate in sense desire, the stronger our delusion gets. And being content with just mindfulness. Again, there's actually a lot of people these days who practice mindfulness just as a way of intensifying the pleasure of sensory experiences, just as a way of having a slightly more pleasant life. And I mean, I guess that's okay. It just isn't Buddhism. It doesn't have anything to do with Buddhism, in fact. You can practice mindfulness and not be getting one step closer to enlightenment, because mindfulness itself does not produce wisdom. Mindfulness itself just produces a more intense experience of whatever you're experiencing. That's all. But if you're not using that as a basis for cultivating wisdom, then you won't get 1 inch closer to enlightenment. So this is really important. It's really important to understand this. Buddhism is not mindfulness, and mindfulness is not Buddhism. Nonetheless, mindfulness is one of the tools that we use in Buddhism, and it's a very important tool. In fact, it's one of the 8 steps of the Noble Eightfold Path, is right mindfulness. Note, by the way, right mindfulness. The Buddha does say that there's 2 kinds of mindfulness: right mindfulness and wrong mindfulness. So again, even the Buddha said that there's mindfulness itself is not necessarily a good thing. It depends on what you're being mindful of. It depends on how you're applying your mindfulness. It depends upon your underlying motivations and intentions behind your mindfulness. So mindfulness itself is not necessarily a good thing. And Abhidhamma even goes one step farther and says that actually mindfulness is always present all the time. Every single state of consciousness contains mindfulness. There's never a moment where there's not mindfulness. The variations are in terms of intensity and direction of mindfulness, but mindfulness is always there. So yeah, this big focus these days on mindfulness it's all very cute and relatively harmless, I suppose. It's just not Buddhism. It doesn't really have much to do with Buddhism. Mindfulness is only Buddhist when it's part of the Noble Eightfold Path. Otherwise, it's not Buddhist. Okay, so then a person named Grump. I love your name. That should be my name. I should be Bhante Grumpy. So Grump says, that's why I do loving kindness meditation all the time. Otherwise, I would be utterly intolerable. Ayasoma knows. She's seen me when I skip my metta meditation. It's not a pretty sight. Anyway, so Grump says, just recently discovered the channel, loving these talks and all the content. Thank you so much. Much metta. Great. So it sounds like you already know the right thing to do. Denise says, when we learn meditation in lay settings, we are told it will take years to get results and to keep trying. Perhaps that is partly why people are not able to figure out what is happening in their minds. That's an interesting point. Actually, I would say that if you're doing the same thing for years and not getting results, then clearly something's wrong. Don't just keep banging your head against the wall over and over again. Take a step back and have a look around and see if maybe there's another way. Maybe there's a door in the wall a bit farther down. Or maybe you can climb over the wall or go around the wall or under the wall. Or maybe you realize you don't actually need to get to the other side of that wall after all. Maybe you can go in a different direction entirely. So yeah, I actually completely disagree with this idea that it will take years to see results from your practice. I say if you're not seeing results from your practice within a couple of weeks, then something's gone terribly wrong. And you need to go and talk to a teacher, and clearly a better teacher, one who's not going to tell you just to keep doing the same dumb thing for years and years on end. Clearly, it's not working, and you need to do something different. Realistically, you should actually be able to see some kind of noticeable effect in a single period of meditation. Not necessarily earth-shattering, life-altering changes, but you should be able to see some kind of shift in the mind in even one period of meditation. And over the course of a couple of weeks, you should be able to see a significant shift. And if not, then yeah, I would say whatever you're doing is maybe not working and it's time to try something different. So Adine says, tonight is the night that I learned that I needn't keep trying to do mindfulness of breathing. Great. Welcome to the club. Yeah. Yeah, actually, I would say that one of the big disservices in the Theravada world. So in the Theravada world, we've got dozens of different meditation techniques, but everybody just talks about mindfulness of breathing. I'm like, what's going on here? It's kind of like if you've got a farm which grows 100 different kinds of vegetables, but they just keep serving zucchini every single day. Only zucchini, nothing but zucchini. They just ignore the other 99 vegetables on the farm. It's like, well, maybe we planted all those things for a reason. Maybe they actually serve a purpose. And maybe just only eating zucchini all the time isn't actually good for everyone. So it's the same. The Buddha taught dozens of different meditation techniques. Mindfulness of breathing is only one of them. And it works very well for some people and not very well for some other people. For some people, it's occasionally beneficial and occasionally unbeneficial. So it's I really don't agree with this approach of just telling everyone to do mindfulness of breathing. I think it's a really terrible disservice to people. I think the proper thing to do is to present people with a wide variety of different methods and encourage them to try out a bunch of different things and see what happens. So Adine says, mindfulness of the body and contemplating on the six elements both help me toward understanding anatta. That's great. Yeah. Mark asks, so you said, don't move the mind. So does this mean the more our concentration increases, we can actually stop the mind? Yes. Actually, this is something the Buddha says in a few places in the suttas. One of the more well-known examples is the Vitakka Sutta. At the end of the Vitakka Sutta, I think it's Majjhima Nikaya number 20, if I recall correctly. The discourse on stilling thought. And at the end of it, the Buddha says, if you master these practices, then you'll think what you want to think, and you won't think what you don't want to think. You will be the master of the course of your thoughts. So yes, absolutely. You can learn how to stop your thoughts if you want to. It can be done. Kauser Friend says, I feel like I have gotten most results with metta and breath, but I have not given other methods enough of an honest try. How investigative should we be? One could spend all life trying new things. Yeah, and that might actually be a life well spent. But realistically, I would say, first off, if you have some methods which work really well for you, then use those as your main methods, your methods that you use most of the time, your fallback methods that you do whenever you don't have something else in mind. Maybe that's what you do 80% of the time, for example, just to pick a random, arbitrarily large number. But also experiment with other things just to see what happens. You never know what might surprise you. You might try out a new method and be like, oh, I actually really like this. And I really feel the difference it makes. Like the first time I did the 6 elements, I was like, wow. I actually thought that meditation was kind of dumb when I first heard about it, but then I did it and I was like, wow, you can really feel this. This really does something. So give yourself that space to investigate and try different things. But yeah, keep spending most of your time with the methods that you already have a solid foundation in. Because if it's working, there's no sense in throwing it out the window. Mike asks, I found the meditation on the 6 elements really helpful. Great. Still having trouble figuring out the consciousness element, though. How should I approach this one? Yeah, that's not surprising. It's by far the most difficult of the 6. As I see it, the 6 elements are arranged in order of subtlety, which also means for most people, it's roughly order of difficulty. And also, usually people find that they resonate strongly with one or two or three of the elements and then have a hard time with the others. So, for example, I do very well with the earth element, the fire element, and to a lesser degree, the space element. But the other three are a bit more challenging for me. So that tends to be the case. Most people connect strongly with one or two or three of the elements and then struggle with the other ones. And that's fine. You just keep practicing, and you'll get more skill with the other elements as well. As for the consciousness element, uh, it's actually always present. Otherwise, you wouldn't be conscious. You would have no awareness. If there was no consciousness element, there could be no awareness. So it's always here. And actually, what works best for me in approaching the consciousness element is through analogizing it to the space element, as during the meditation instructions I was giving. Because the consciousness element is very much like the space element. It's just the space element is physical, and the consciousness element is non-physical. It's mental. But otherwise, their characteristics are extremely similar. So for me, that's the easiest way to approach it, is through the lens of the space element. Yen says, I don't think you are grumpy. You have a lot of unexpressed metta and compassion. That's very kind of you, Jens. I think you say that because you are full of metta and compassion. And I hope you come back soon, by the way. Linda says, I've begun to not only use Theravada, but to incorporate Tibetan meditation as well. It is intense. Yeah, I gotta tell you, the Tibetan Buddhism, in terms of sheer range, variety, and complexity of meditation methods, they're definitely at the top. They really had a field day with coming up with ways to meditate. Yeah, and some of them are incredibly powerful, incredibly potent. So I don't regularly use any particular methods from Tibetan Buddhism. But over the years, we've had a number of Tibetan Buddhist monastics come to our monastery and share their practices. And when they're here, I practice what they're teaching. And yeah, I found that it can be really powerful ways of developing wholesome states of mind. Yeah, one that in particular fits very well into the Theravada framework is Tonglen. So Tonglen is a way of developing compassion that, again, can be incredibly powerful. Okay, Bhavani asks, meditating on an object, is it like knowing the complete Dhamma, parenthesis, truth of that meditation object? I think you're overthinking it. You're just focusing on an object, that's all. Is it knowing it completely? Yeah, I guess so. But it's knowing it through direct experience. Like the same way that I know this water bottle. I couldn't tell you how much it weighs. I couldn't tell you what it's made out of. I couldn't tell you where it was manufactured. I can't tell you any of those things. But I feel it. I feel the truth of this water bottle, which is much more important than being able to recite facts. I feel the truth of it. So that's what we're doing. We pick up a meditation object and we feel it completely. So in that sense, yes, you can say that meditating on an object is knowing it completely. And that's the last question from YouTube. Do we have anything from the monastery residents?
So we spent the past few days on retreat, which has been amazing. Actually, I didn't realize just how much cell phones destroy wisdom and samadhi.
So true.
Yeah, but anyway, so after retreat and just anyone who's in retreat conditions. Obviously, there are very specific sort of conditions that don't necessarily continue afterwards. So, on one hand, is it realistic to expect that one could maintain or sort of approach the same level of samadhi outside of retreat? Or how to look at it in a realistic way? What kind of conditions would be necessary for
Mm.
that?
Yeah, it's true that retreat is optimal conditions for samadhi. So you will tend to have stronger samadhi during retreat. And it's not realistic to expect your samadhi outside of retreat to be as good. Yeah, it's not the case. But if you are careful to create supportive conditions outside of retreat and to avoid creating harmful conditions, such as, for example, leaving your phone in the basement all day long, even when it's not retreat time, and only going for it when you have a specific need, a specific reason. Of course, living in a monastery, we have pretty good supportive conditions, but actually we can always consider how can it be more supportive. So avoiding unnecessary conversation, especially conversations about non-dhamma. We want to avoid chattering away about senseless things as much as possible. Cultivating sense restraint at all times, cultivating mental silence at all times, cultivating mindfulness and clear awareness at all times. These are all things you can do outside of retreat. It's just a bit more difficult. But if you do that, then you'll find that when you're practicing meditation, that your samadhi is actually still pretty good. And also what you learn during retreat, the skills that you develop during retreat, you'll still remember to some degree. It can be a little harder, but yeah, I've had times where it was not during retreat time, and I was just sitting there and meditating, and there's just this visceral feeling of how to enter samadhi. Like the skill was there, and I was just into samadhi, and it wasn't a retreat time, but the samadhi is really strong. And then we get distracted and caught up in emails and phones and conversations and activities, and we forget. Because the skills of meditation are quite subtle, and they're non-verbal. So it's easy to forget if we allow ourselves to get caught up in other things. Yeah. Okay. Okay, we have another question. Kauser friend says, is fear a common experience during insight meditation? Yeah, I spoke about this earlier in the talk series. Yeah, many people do experience fear, especially with the perception of impermanence, the perception of not self, and silent illumination practice. It's very common to experience fear. Fear means that you have attachment. And you're coming up against the very real possibility that you need to let go of what you're attached to. That produces fear. But when you just go ahead and let go, then the fear also disappears. When you let go of the object of attachment, then the fear also vanishes. You're also letting go of the fear. So yeah, fear is common, but as you continue to practice, the fear will go away. But you can also remind yourself. You can remind yourself that there's nothing to be afraid of. You're just doing the same practices that every single bodhisattva, every single aspiring arhat, every single person on the path to awakening, they have all done exactly what you're doing and got pretty good results for them. So you have nothing to be afraid of. You're not going to lose anything valuable. You're only going to lose your dukkha. That's all. You're only going to lose your delusion. That's all. You have nothing to be afraid of. You're not going to lose anything important. And instead, you're going to gain something far more valuable. So actually in the Mahamenua tradition, so one of the meditation traditions from Sri Lanka, actually both study and meditation, they put a huge emphasis on reading the suttas as well as on practicing meditation. One of their recommendations is at before each period of meditation. So when you're starting a period of meditation, to remind yourself, I am now doing the practices that were taught by the Buddha. I am now doing the practices which were followed by the Buddha's disciples. I am now doing the practices which led them to awakening. So I am setting out on the path which all awakened beings followed in order to attain awakening. So reminding yourself of that, it helps to eliminate the basis for fear. Because then when you see the fear arising, you know that it's just delusion. It's just the product of delusion, and there's nothing valid there. There's nothing to be afraid of. Then Jet Magia asks, tell me what it means to love. So that's a little off topic. Normally you would be at the right time. So Friday night is when we normally do monk chat, which is the opportunity to ask all kinds of random questions. So I'm afraid I'm going to have to ask you to wait until next Friday. So write down your question and ask it again next Friday during monk chat. And then you'll have 3 monks who can answer that question. And we get that sort of question a lot, so don't worry, we know how to answer. Any other questions? Not about love? Okay, go ahead.
Is there a correlation between the meditation on the element of space and consciousness with the formless attainments?
Yes. So in the, I don't think it's actually specifically in the suttas, but it is in the Visuddhimagga. In the Visuddhimagga, it says that meditating on the space element can lead you into the perception of infinite space. And meditating on the consciousness element can lead you into the perception of infinite consciousness. So again, this is not actually the description that's used in the suttas per se, but it is in line with what's in the suttas. In the suttas for infinite space, it says not paying attention to anything physical. So disregarding all physical objects. One pays attention to the infinity of space. And by so doing, one can enter the perception of infinite space. So again, you can see how the Visuddhimagga perspective is not dramatically different. And similarly, from the awareness of infinite space, one recognizes that consciousness is aware of infinite space. Therefore, consciousness is containing infinite space. Therefore, consciousness is also infinite. So you can then come to the infinity of consciousness based upon the infinity of space. So again, though, those are samadhi states, whereas the 6 elements, at least the way I practice it, the 6 elements is for developing insight. But yeah, if you want to try to enter the formless samadhi states, go for it. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I ask because I normally do the 6 elements of the samadhi practice. So
Yeah. Yeah, actually, one of the inspiring things from Ayakema's autobiography is she talks about how she was already familiar with the 4 jhanas, and she had some skill with jhana practice. And then one day she was just like, I've always been reading about these formless attainments, but I've never felt them. Maybe I'll try. And she said all she had to do was just point her mind towards the formless attainments, and she realized she could access them. So then she spent some time hanging out in the formless attainments. But I found this so cute. She was just like, I've read about this, but I've never felt it. I'm going to do it. And she did it. So yeah, they're there. You can do them if you want to. And sometime in the next couple of weeks, I'm supposed to give a talk on the subject as well. Yeah. In the suttas, it's normally described as being a continuance from the 4th jhana. So you start by practicing the 4 jhanas, and then you use that as a springboard to getting into the formless attainments. Uh, in the Visuddhimagga, I think it's presented as it's not necessary to have the 4 jhanas first, that you can go directly to the formless attainments. I don't recall off the top of my mind if there's any clear basis for that in the suttas or not. I don't have experience with the formless attainment, so I can't speak from experience on that. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Here's something more back down to earth. Basic meditation, no jhana, no immaterial, but maybe Bhante, you can relate to this seeming paradox. Can you relate to doing a normal, of course, we're monastic, so meditating more than the average person, but in a non-retreat setting, an hour in the morning, an hour in the evening, maybe 30 minutes, 45 minutes throughout the day, meditation sessions with clear-mindedness, with some bliss in there, versus in the retreat setting, you're pushing harder, you're meditating more, but can you relate to sometimes it seems like the mind is crazier, noisier, less peaceful? That's a paradox because you think the samadhi will be greater. But in my personal experience, my normal scheduled meditations are more pleasant, more clear-minded, more clear comprehension, and all of that. As a rule, generally, than in a retreat setting. I find that baffling. Really crazy.
Sometimes I have that experience as well, especially in the first couple of days of retreat. And there's a few things that I think can be going on there. First off, I should say investigate your mind and see what is going on there. But there's a few things that can be going on there. One thing is that often we're just more aware. We're more aware of how noisy the mind is. So it's not necessarily that the mind actually is noisier during retreat. We're just more aware of its noisiness. And since we're doing a lot more hours of meditation, then there's a lot more opportunity to be aware of the noisiness of the mind. But if you pay attention to your mind on an ordinary daily schedule, you'll realize that it's actually pretty noisy most of the time then as well. It's just that since we have activities, we don't notice as much. So that's part of it. Another thing which can happen is that since you're doing less meditation on a normal day, sometimes we put more effort into it. Whereas during a retreat, we're kind of like, well, I'm going to be doing 10 hours of meditation, so I can spend this one daydreaming. It won't hurt. I'll try harder in the next one. So there can be this tendency to actually be a little bit lazier during retreat. So watch that mind. Watch that tendency to be a bit of a slacker during retreat. I see it in myself sometimes. It's not uncommon. Those are my thoughts. Yeah. Okay, so it's 9 o'clock now. So we should go ahead and end for the evening. So thank you all for joining in, and please join in next week. We'll have our usual sutta study and Dhamma talks and Friday night monk chat. We'll be resuming that next week as usual. So we'll end the evening with 3 sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.